My name is Clara, and on a sweltering August afternoon in Charleston, I watched my daughter's world crumble. She thought she was about to inherit a future. I knew she was about to inherit the truth. And the truth, well, it was all we had left. Before we dive into family betrayal, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. The air in Mr. Harris's office was thick as suffocating as the heat outside. The scent of old mahogany and aging paper hung in the space, mingling with the steady, indifferent tick-tock of the large grandfather clock in the corner. Every tick felt like a hammer against my ribs, and every tock was a reminder that time on my lie had run out. I glanced at Olivia, my daughter. She sat straight-backed in the leather chair across from me, a picture of youth and confidence. At 22, she was as radiant as a newly bloomed camellia, the flower her father Robert had loved most. The blue silk dress she wore today was surely expensive, a gift she'd bought herself to celebrate this big day. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she occasionally smoothed her golden blonde hair. She had no idea. How could she? For the last 5 years, I had built a fortress around her, a stronghold made of lies and exhausting work shifts, all to shield her from the storm I knew was coming. And now that storm was right here in this room. I clenched my calloused hands in my lap. My simple cotton dress felt out of place in the formal office, just as I felt out of place in this role I was playing. I wasn't the widow of a wealthy man who had thoughtfully left a legacy to secure his daughter's future. I was just a tired, 62-year-old woman with a heart heavy with secrets. Mr. Harris, our old family lawyer, cleared his throat. His reading glasses slid down his nose as he looked at the documents before him. He'd known our family since Robert and I were first married. His gaze flickered toward me with a hint of pity before he began to read. "And after all administrative fees and outstanding debts have been settled," he said in a monotone voice, "the estate of Mr. Robert Thompson shall, according to his last will and testament, be transferred to the sole beneficiary, his daughter, Ms. Olivia Thompson." Olivia leaned forward slightly, a satisfied smile gracing her lips. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the moment I had been dreading. Mr. Harris turned the page. The silence stretched for a second, and I could hear my own heart pounding. However, he continued, his tone a little softer, after a full audit of the assets, including bank accounts, investments, and real property, we have found that there are no net assets remaining. The smile on Olivia's face froze. I don't understand." "Real property. What about our house?" "The house was mortgaged a second time to cover medical expenses." "Ms. Thompson," Mr. Harris explained gently. "In fact, not only are there no assets, but there are several outstanding debts from the final medical treatments. Here is the list." He pushed a single sheet of paper across the polished wooden desk. The numbers swam before my eyes, but Olivia stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. A dead silence fell over the room. The ticking of the clock was deafening now. I watched the color drain from her cheeks, replaced by a stark white. Her eyes, once so clear and hopeful, clouded over with disbelief, which slowly morphed into an emotion I recognized instantly, the sting of betrayal. Her gaze finally lifted from the paper and shot directly at me, as sharp as a shard of broken glass. "You knew," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You knew this whole time, didn't you?" I couldn't find the words. My throat closed up. All I could do was sit there and bear the weight of her stare. Olivia shot up from her chair, its legs scraping against the floor. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Her silence was more damning than any accusation. She turned and walked out of the office without a single backward glance. A moment later, the heavy front door slammed shut, the sound echoing down the hall, leaving me alone in the shattered quiet. In that moment, I wasn't just a grieving widow. I was a liar, a fraud in the eyes of my only child. I had spent 5 years building a beautiful lie to protect her, only to have it shatter us both. Was I wrong to shield her from the storm? Or did my silence create a hurricane of its own? If you've ever had to make an impossible choice for someone you love, stay with me. This story is for you. We would be so grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us share more stories like this one. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. The drive home from the lawyer's office was silent. The oppressive Charleston heat seemed to have seeped into the car, making it hard to breathe. But it was the quiet that was truly suffocating. Olivia's furious departure had left a void, a vacuum filled with unspoken accusations and the echoes of a life that had never been real. As I navigated the familiar streets of Mount Pleasant, my mind drifted away from the sterile, mahogany-paneled office and back to a time when our little house was filled with noise, laughter, and the smell of sawdust. Robert was a craftsman, a man who spoke through his hands. His workshop in our garage was his sanctuary, and from it came the sturdy kitchen table we ate at every night, the rocking chair I sat in to read to Olivia when she was a little girl, and the intricate birdhouses that dotted our backyard. He wasn't a man of grand pronouncements, but his love was in the solid feel of a well-sanded piece of wood, in the way he'd hum off-key while he worked. Our life was like one of his creations, simple, strong, and built to last. Or so I thought. We weren't wealthy, not by Charleston standards, but we were comfortable. My part-time job at the library and Robert's custom carpentry business gave us everything we needed. Our happiness was measured in weekend trips to Folly Beach with sandy sandwiches and the salty spray of the Atlantic on our faces. It was in the smoky aroma of Robert's barbecue on Sunday afternoons, a ritual that brought neighbors drifting into our yard, drawn by the smell and his easygoing charm. Most of all, our happiness was in Olivia. Robert adored her. He saw in her an artistic spirit that mirrored his own, though hers expressed itself in paint and charcoal, not wood. When she declared she wanted to open her own art gallery one day, he didn't blink. He started a savings account for her that very week, labeling it Olivia's Gallery Fund. A dream needs a foundation. Clara, he told me, his eyes shining with pride. We'll give her that. That foundation, along with every other one we'd built, began to crack the day the doctors gave us the diagnosis. It was a rare, aggressive cancer. The words hung in the sterile air of the examination room at MUSC, sharp and incomprehensible. The fight was long and brutal. It was a blur of hospital corridors, the beeping of machines, and the hollow, cheerful voices of nurses. Robert, my strong, capable, Robert grew thin and frail, but his spirit never broke. He fought not for himself, but for us. The financial bleed started almost immediately. Olivia's Gallery Fund was the first to go drain to cover the first round of treatments that insurance deemed experimental. We told ourselves it was just a loan, that we'd replenish it as soon as Robert was back on his feet. Then went our own savings, the nest egg we'd carefully built for our retirement. I took on more hours at the library. Robert, on his good days, would still take small commissions, working until his hands shook with fatigue. But it was like trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon while the drain was wide open. The final devastating blow was the second mortgage. I remember sitting at our kitchen table late one night, the table Robert had built with the loan documents spread out before me. Taking on that debt felt like a betrayal of everything we had worked for. But when I looked at Robert sleeping fitfully in the next room, I knew there was no choice. You can't put a price on a few more months, a few more weeks, a few more days. The end came not in the cold, impersonal hospital, but at home in the bedroom we had shared for 30 years. The hospice nurse had left, and it was just the two of us. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets outside and the soft hum of his oxygen machine. He took my hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "Promise me, Clara," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "Don't let this mess fall on her. Let her finish college. Let her have her youth, her dreams." His eyes, sunken but clear, found mine. Let her believe I left her something beautiful. Let her believe I provided for her. It's the last thing I can give her. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "I promise, Robert," I choked out. "I promise." It was a sacred vow made to the man I loved in the final moments of his life. It was a promise I intended to keep no matter the cost, and the cost was high. After the funeral, when the casseroles stopped coming and the sympathetic phone calls dwindled, I was left with a mountain of debt and a secret that felt heavier than my grief. My new life began. I was a librarian by day, my hands sorting books, while my mind sorted numbers trying to make them add up. By night, I became a waitress at a small diner off Coleman Boulevard. I'd trade my quiet library cardigans for a cheap polyester uniform that always smelled faintly of grease. I learned to function on 5 hours of sleep. I'd come home long after midnight, my feet aching and my back screaming in protest, and eat leftover meatloaf standing over the kitchen sink. The loneliness was a physical presence in the empty house, but every time I transferred a few extra dollars from my tip money into Olivia's checking account, I felt a flicker of purpose. I was keeping my promise. The phone calls with Olivia were the hardest. She was thriving at the University of Virginia, her world expanding with new ideas and new friends. She'd call, her voice bubbling with excitement about a new art history course or a weekend trip to Washington, D.C. "Oh, Mom, you wouldn't believe the galleries there," she'd say. "It's making me so excited for my own. I've already started drafting a business plan. Dad would be so proud. He would be sweetheart," I'd say, forcing a cheerful tone while staring at a red final notice on a hospital bill. "You just focus on your studies. Your father made sure you'd be taken care of." Every lie was a small tear in my soul. The cracks in my carefully constructed fortress began to appear at family gatherings. Robert's younger brother, Martin, a successful real estate developer, with a condescending smile, was always the first to chip away at it. At Thanksgiving that first year, he cornered me by the dessert table. "So, Clara," he began, swirling the brandy in his glass, "how are you managing with Robert's estate?" "He had some good investments, I trust. I always told him he should have been more aggressive with his portfolio." "We're doing just fine, Martin," I'd reply, my smile tight. Robert was a very prudent man. "Prudent, yes," he'd muse, looking down his nose at me. "But this is a tough market. I just hope you have a good financial advisor. It would be a shame to see Robert's hard work go to waste." His words were couched in concern, but they were laced with doubt, and I knew he was planting those same seeds with the rest of the family. Then came Mark. Olivia brought him home for Christmas during her junior year. He was handsome, charming, and came from a family whose name was etched onto buildings and charity plaques all over Charleston. He talked about sailing trips to the Bahamas and summers in the Hamptons as if they were weekend errands. He was besotted with Olivia, and she with him. He was also the reason the lie had to grow. Olivia, wanting to fit into his world, started to embellish the story I had given her. The something beautiful her father had left her became a sizable trust fund in her conversations with Mark and his friends. I'd overhear her on the phone talking about using her inheritance to open a gallery in the prestigious French Quarter. Each word was another brick in the wall separating us, a wall I had built myself. The pressure was immense. I couldn't bear the thought of her being humiliated in front of Mark and his wealthy family. So I stayed silent, and the lie took on a life of its own. When I finally pulled into our driveway after leaving the lawyer's office, the house looked different. The cheerful yellow door Robert had painted seemed mocking. The camellia bushes he'd planted, now in full bloom, felt like a memorial to a life of honesty we no longer had. The silence inside was even worse than in the car. It was heavy accusatory. I found Olivia in her childhood bedroom, sitting on the edge of her bed. She wasn't crying. Her face was a pale, hard mask. "How could you?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "How could you let me live like that, like a spoiled princess in a fairy tale?" "Olivia, honey, I wanted to protect you," I started, my voice trembling. "Protect me!" She shot to her feet, her voice rising with a hysterical edge. "You humiliated me. You watched me make plans, apply for business loans I could never pay back, talk to Mark about our future. A future built on your lies." "Did you enjoy the show, Mom?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. My heart sank. Through the glass, I could see my brother-in-law, Martin. He must have heard from his lawyer friend already. He swept into the house with an air of grave concern that didn't reach his eyes. "Clara, Olivia." "My dear," he said, placing a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "I heard what happened. An absolute travesty. I tried to warn you, honey. Your father was a good man, but your mother, she never had a head for finances." He looked at me with faux sympathy. I'm sure you did your best, Clara, but you should have asked for help. To let it get to this point. To squander everything Robert worked for. That was it. The accusation, so casually cruel, broke something inside me. It wasn't just about Olivia anymore. It was about Robert. It was about his honor. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I turned and walked silently to the small study Robert used to use. In the bottom drawer of his old oak desk was a simple cardboard box. I pulled it out and carried it back to the living room, placing it on the coffee table in front of Olivia and Martin. My hands were steady. With a deep breath, I tipped the box over. Its contents spilled out across the polished wood. It wasn't stocks or bonds. It was 5 years of harsh reality, a thick, horrifying stack of medical bills, many stamped with final notice in angry red ink. The second mortgage agreement with its terrifying interest rate. A stack of denial letters from the insurance company, their clinical language refusing to pay for hope. And underneath it all, my 2 worn-out spiral notebooks from the diner. I opened one. Page after page of my cramped handwriting detailed every shift, every dollar earned in tips, and where it all went, $74.50. Electric bill, 120 tons. Olivia's books, 50 tons. Groceries. This is your father's inheritance. Olivia, I said, my voice low and shaking with suppressed emotion. This is the fortune he left us. Not money. It was 5 years of fighting to keep him alive. It was the nights I worked until my bones ached, so you wouldn't have to worry about tuition. It was the promise I made to him, the last promise he ever asked of me. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to honor him. Martin was speechless for once. Olivia stared at the mess on the table, her face ashen. She picked up one of the medical bills, her hand trembling. The reality of the numbers, the sheer scale of the debt, was finally sinking in. Her gaze shifted from the papers to my face, and for the first time I think she truly saw me not as a liar, but as a woman who had been drowning for 5 years while trying to keep her daughter's head above water. Reeling, she stumbled back and pulled out her phone. I knew who she was calling. "Mark," she whispered into the phone. "Something's happened." I could only hear her side of the conversation, her voice cracking as she tried to explain. "No, the money. It's not there. It was never there. It was all a mistake. No, there's a lot of debt." A long pause followed. I could see the hope draining from her face as she listened. "I see," she said finally, her voice flat. "Okay. Goodbye, Mark." She hung up her hand, falling to her side. Her face was a blank canvas of shock. A minute later, her phone buzzed on the table. We both looked down at the screen. It was a text from Mark. "I think we need a break. I need some space to process this." That single cowardly message was the final blow. It shattered the last of her illusions, the last vestige of the glittering false world she had inhabited. She sank onto the couch, surrounded by the paper debris of our real life, and finally she began to cry. Not the angry tears of a betrayed daughter, but the deep, ragged sobs of someone whose entire world had been ripped away, leaving nothing but a painful, terrifying truth. I stood there, my heart breaking for her, knowing this was the bottom. This was the ruin from which we would have to rebuild. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. In the days that followed, a heavy silence settled over our house, more suffocating than the quiet in the car on the drive home from the lawyer's office. It wasn't a peaceful silence, but a jagged one filled with unsaid words and open wounds. Olivia holed herself up in her room. I'd occasionally hear her pacing, the sound of a drawer being angrily pulled open, but mostly there was just stillness. Martin never called. He had lit the fuse and was now content to watch from a distance. I continued my routine, the library by day, the diner by night. But now the ache in my bones was accompanied by a different kind of pain, a gnawing guilt. Every time I looked at Olivia's closed bedroom door, the promise I'd made to Robert echoed in my head. But now it sounded like an accusation. I had protected her from the financial burden, only to push her into a more devastating kind of pain. About a week after the confrontation, I came home from my evening shift, exhausted and soaked from a sudden downpour. As I walked in, I was surprised to find the kitchen light on. Olivia was sitting at the table Robert had built, surrounded by the papers, the medical bills, the mortgage documents, my notebooks all arranged in neat stacks. She had been crying. Her eyes were puffy, but her expression held a strange calm. "I added it all up," she said, her voice raspy. "I can't believe it. All these years you've been—" She trailed off, just shaking her head in disbelief. I sat down across from her, feeling a small shift in the air between us. The wall of ice was beginning to crack. "It's what had to be done," I said softly. "No," she replied, looking me straight in the eye. "It's what you chose to do. I was so angry with you. But I'm even angrier with myself. I was so blind. That was the beginning. The conversation that night didn't fix everything, but it opened a door. Over the next few weeks, we started to talk hesitantly at first, then with more openness. We talked about Robert, about his illness, about the choices I'd had to face. Olivia started asking practical questions about the debts, about interest rates, about my income. She was no longer the dreaming princess. She was looking reality square in the face. The real turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the kitchen when Olivia came in through the back door, her hands covered in dust. "I was in Dad's workshop," she said. I wanted to be around his things." Robert's workshop in the garage had been left almost untouched since he'd passed. It still smelled of pine and machine oil, a scent I would forever associate with him. Olivia continued to spend time out there at first, just cleaning, organizing his tools, wiping the dust from unfinished pieces of wood. She said it helped her think. Then one day she found it. Tucked beneath a stack of old blueprints was a shoebox. Inside weren't shoes, but small leather-bound notebooks. They were Robert's journals. He had started writing them shortly after his diagnosis. That night, Olivia brought the journals into the living room. "I think we should read these together," she said. And so we did. Page by page, we relived Robert's last years through his own words. He wrote about his fear, about his pain, but mostly he wrote about his love. He wrote about how proud he was watching me handle everything, how it broke his heart to have to dip into Olivia's gallery fund. Then we came to an entry written just a few weeks before he died. "Clara worries I don't know how bad things are." I read aloud, my voice trembling. "She thinks she's hiding it from me, but I see it all. I see the dark circles under her eyes. I see the new calluses on her hands from the diner. She's a warrior. My greatest burden isn't this sickness, it's knowing I'm leaving that burden to her. I made her promise me last night. I made her promise to let Livy have her youth, to let her believe I provided for her. It's a lie, I know. It's a terrible weight to put on Clara. But it's the last selfish thing a dying father can ask. I just want my daughter to remember me as a man who gave her a foundation, even if that foundation was only a dream." When I finished reading, we were both silent, tears streaming down our faces. Olivia reached across the table and took my hand. "I get it, Mom," she whispered. "I finally truly get it." In that moment, all the anger, the betrayal, and the hurt melted away, leaving only a profound understanding and a shared grief. We weren't just crying for Robert. We were crying for the years of silence, for the burden I had carried alone, and for Olivia's lost innocence. After that night, everything changed. Olivia canceled her plans to take a semester off and instead enrolled in classes at a local community college for small business management. She sold her expensive car and got a part-time job at an art supply store. Our house was no longer silent. It was filled with discussions about budgets, plans for paying down the debt, and even laughter. We had become a team. About a year after that fateful day in the lawyer's office, Olivia came to me with a notebook full of sketches and figures. "I still want to open a gallery," she said, her eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen for a very long time. But not the kind I used to think about. Not in the French Quarter. Right here. She pointed out the window toward the garage. "Dad's workshop. I want to turn it into a community space, a place for local artists, people like him, who make beautiful things with their hands. We could hold classes, small shows. I've run the numbers. It'll be hard and it will take years, but it's real." I looked at my daughter, no longer a young girl, dreaming of an unearned fortune, but a strong young woman, ready to build her own future from the ground up. She had found her true inheritance. They say the truth will set you free, but they don't tell you that first, it will tear you apart. My lie was born from love, but it nearly destroyed the one thing Robert and I had built: our family. The real legacy he left behind wasn't something you could put in a bank. It was the strength to face the truth, no matter how hard it was. It was the resilience to rebuild from the ashes. It was the work ethic carved into every piece of wood in his workshop, and it was the love, the kind that asks for nothing but presence and honesty. Every family story has its secrets and its quiet sacrifices. Have you ever had to face a difficult truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read them all. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.